I felt the need to bring a new perspective to the whole diversity debate by creating a coherent history of women in law. And then people can take whatever they want, but at least they can ground it into something that is accurate historically, and it's based on records rather than just speculation. When I came across the photograph with Dorothy as the only woman in the middle, the thing that really struck me was the color, the bright blue that came through, and the numbers on the men. And she didn't have a number. The whole description of the photograph didn't center on her, even though she was the most striking presence. I wanted to explore it because I felt it was a story about a woman surrounded by men that were clearly influential. I was keen for the project to tell the story in a very accessible way. I think the project is about access to justice, and I felt there was a kind of separation between how lawyers truly are, the human behind the law, and how they come across to the society they serve. And I felt it was really important to create a very accessible format in which we will tell their stories, their personal life stories, in a very simple way so that everybody can relate. It's not just a project for lawyers, it's a project for all the people they serve. In this photograph, I am 12 and I'm in this school library, which I obviously loved. It shows me dressed as a pioneer, which I always find very amusing because the concept of pioneer to me was just about being part of the system in communism. Salute the leadership. So in my new world life, it's really interesting to be called a pioneer. I don't have many pictures with my father, but I really like this one. It really captures the way I related with my father. Well, this is the christening of my daughter. I love this photograph because it just captures that intimacy that parents have with their children on a happy day. I was born in Transylvania and I was the youngest of 3 girls. My parents were very simple. My mother was terrible in school. She hated school. And throughout my life and even today, she always would say, "Why do you need all these books?" Which is probably describing very well why I have thousands of books in protest. Whereas my father felt very able. He grew up in the war and he kind of had to self-teach a lot to get anywhere. So he said, my girls will go to university and, none of this, marry at 18 and, have lots of children. That is what he expected of us, and that's what we did. I started as a journalist when I was 18, out of high school. I had a sense that, being a local journalist or a Romanian national journalist wasn't enough. I felt there were bigger stories that I needed to cover, that I had to be an international journalist. So I first came to the UK on a journalism scholarship with the Reuters Foundation. I did some work for the BBC World Service. I did some work with the Economist Group. I travelled and it was really fascinating. I could listen to people and ask them questions and make them feel their stories will be heard. There are some really difficult questions in the world that I can ask, but I felt like I needed to be educated before I was credible to ask them. So I applied to read history at the LSE with international relations. I really felt I needed to learn about the past, which I guess again explains my fascination with the past to shape the future. My husband is a lawyer, and I always was very interested in the stories and the magazines. One day I just said, I seem to be really interested in what's going on in your profession. Maybe I should get a professional qualification. And I felt law was a little bit like journalism. It was all centered on words. The law school was pretty adamant that, part-time studying will not lead to success. It really puzzled me that I had been slightly written off because I embarked on a legal career by studying in the evenings. And obviously I didn't agree with that assessment, and I went off and got a training contract with one of the top 5 firms, which slightly puzzled the school. When I joined my law firm, I found out it would be very different from my life as a journalist on my first day. And I remember actually quite strongly how I had this sense of loss of freedom. It just felt really dehumanized. I generally felt when I joined the law that it was, law is in everything. I felt it was justice is, I was admiring it because having been through communism, I felt that justice is a really important recourse, being able to access it and, treasure it. But I felt that was all about people. What's the point of having law if it isn't because it's serving a society formed of people? And yet when I arrived, it didn't feel like people played any part in this kind of law. I was already married, so I was the only trainee solicitor who had a partner and had made a family commitment. I kind of was different because I was keen to get home in the evening. I didn't want to be all night in the office unless there was a very good, clear reason for me to be there. There is a culture of presence. There's a culture of prioritizing everything ahead of your family. I decided to run my own business. And again, with my kind of philosophy of life, what have I learned that I can merge to do something new? At the time in 2010, a lot of law firms were looking to reduce costs and reduce, headcount. So there seemed to be a lot of cutting. And there seemed to be no clear answer how the work can be done. My idea was to send it to women that were leaving very large law firms and wanted to continue to work, but not on the same basis, full-time, all the time. And we could project manage the work so the client had a very good service, the lawyers had a way of earning money, and it would still answer some of those pressures the clients had. So I founded Obelisk with that idea in mind of creating a way of connecting clients that had a lot of work to a pool of people that were completely inactive economically and giving a flexible, quality, but more affordable solution. When I went at the beginning and I started meeting primarily the mothers that felt let down by the system, if you like, I was quite puzzled actually by how we came to be in a situation where women felt so disenfranchised from the workplace. I'm very pleased that people that haven't worked before now continue to work and earn a good amount of money. They were all highly educated, highly skilled, and this motherhood moment seemed to devalue them completely. And I really didn't like that, and I felt, even more vindicated for setting up this model around talent that wasn't used. So Obelisk grew from 4 lawyers to over 800 lawyers today, with a multi-million turnover. I came up with this idea because I believed there was a need on both sides, and if you have a demand and a supply, pure economics say it should work. I certainly don't want to think like everybody if I can help it. Not because I feel it's a personal ambition, but I don't think solutions come from groupthink. Obviously, having been brought up under communism where it was a systemic problem, I saw how it stifled people with a lot of talent, and it didn't bring the best in people. So I can't help thinking differently. I guess I maybe have a genetic pool that comes from my father as an inventor who had operated all his life in changing everything he touched. That was his way. He would have a tool, he would make it better. He would challenge why certain things are used in a certain way. So I think I've been surrounded by that way of approaching everything around me. I just like to think about whether the way we do certain bits of work or how we live our life are the best way we could. Now, I'm not saying the answer I give is the best answer, but at least I'm asking the question.